Churchill began referring to Italy as Europe's soft underbelly.
We're back with more of Mark Herman's Churchill, and let me edit away the box. There we go, welcome. Churchill is a game of World War II where players 1 to 3 will take on the role of the great statesman of the Allies, Churchill, Roosevelt, or Stalin. And the object is that these three must cooperate to win the war, defeat Germany and Japan, but we must compete to be the dominant superpower in the post-war world. Okay, this is the illustrated, I guess it matters, example of play where Mark Herman has basically taken on the role of Churchill and is writing in his voice and spinning a narrative as a teaching method. And so far we've gotten through, well, I'll tell you here, this is October 44. This is the Tolstoy, codenamed Tolstoy Conference. And we have gone through the discussion, what is it called? This is the conference phase. And we've gone through the agenda segment and the meeting segment. And in that, the Americans won the most issues, 1, 2, 3. And so they're considered the conference winners. But everyone has some issues. And now we're at the decision segment, where we have to place these issues and gather up our production and get ready to get it all onto the theater maps. Okay, let's get started. So Churchill picks up the narrative. With the conference over, it is time to implement what we have decided. First, the Americans win their argument for the Soviets to launch an offensive into Manchuria, designated by the directive offensive issue, which we go over here and place in the Manchuria space, which is going to force the Soviets to spend offensive resources here. With the Soviets formally declaring war on Japan. Okay, this is one of those conditional issues, like opening up the Normandy invasion. There's also one for the USSR to declare war on Japan, and basically it's if this issue stays in the center, nobody wins it. If the Soviets or anyone else didn't want the Soviet Union to go to war with Japan, then they would debate it and pull it anywhere. And as long as it wasn't in the center, it wouldn't happen. But it does happen. So, and like the Normandy invasion, once this happens, this issue is out of the game. We never debate it again. Since I, i.e. Churchill, and I'm still trying to resist doing the accent, you're looking kind of sus. Yeah, I'll stop. He receives one of the 6 U.S. production markers, and to use at his discretion, at my discretion. Okay. Since Roosevelt won the conference, he decides last on production allocation. So it is now up to me to begin the process of setting military priorities. Yes, we're always going clockwise around the table. And as an example of Allied cooperation, Roosevelt is giving me 1 additional production, boosting my usual 4 to 5 production available for deployment. As I failed to acquire the mandate for Paul Mill action, I now convert all my production into military operations. In other words, these become these. Okay, and by the way, these you flip them over and they go to use. That way you know you've burned them up. Nice mnemonic device there. And he could have made some naval support, but he says here, each production gives me 1 offensive or naval support marker, but it is late in the war and the German and Japanese navies are no longer significant threats. So I devote all my resources to the attack. In other words, he just went for offensive support and no navy. Okay, I received 2 additional for the European leadership issue. So because he won that issue there, that yields up a bonus now. The nice thing is the Soviets can even win these issues even though they can't be the leaders of these theaters, but it still gets them the bonus. Now I also need to make a note here He's taking them now, although we haven't allocated everybody's all the other side's resources. So he's kind of skipping a step here, and I do want to make a note of that. That you're supposed to allocate, everybody is supposed to allocate their production, and then you go to the phase where you determine theater leadership and hand out the bonuses. But I guess just to keep the narrative flow going, he kind of glosses over that, but do be aware of that. Mark Herman is famous for saying, one of these days I'm going to write on my tombstone is going to be written, follow the sequence of play. Always follow the sequence of play, and you will never be confused. Or usually not confused. So Churchill has a grand total of 7 offensive markers. Due to the conference card, if you remember that from back then, I must use one of my 5 production to support the CBI theater. So one of my 7 offensive support markers is placed in Burma. And you just place the offensive on the one you're going to. So this front is going to attempt to move here, so you always put it in the entry. It's called the entry. Now that my mandatory obligations have been met, I use 5 to support the Anglo-American drive for Germany, as the race for Berlin is on. And he doesn't spell that out exactly, but what he means is 5 of these support markers, and they have ×2 on or is that ×2? That's ×2, but it doesn't matter here. Going up to Germany, we're going for West Germany, so we're going to just put them all in there. My last offensive is placed to support our Mediterranean front's drive on northern Italy. And that is right there. Stalin earlier failed his Murmansk convoy die roll as mandated by the conference card, and therefore he does not receive this production resource. This leaves Stalin only his base of 3 production. And he complains to his fellow allies that it is hurting the war effort, as he must resource the mandated Manchuria offensive with 2 of them. I remember that. We won the directed... There's a directed offensive. Oh, we ended up putting it over here. He has to put 2 offensive markers here. And so he's only going to have 1 left. But Roosevelt promises 2 offensive support markers if he will forego converting his Paul Mill issue. Remember, Stalin won that. And Roosevelt is offering a deal, and like this is a game of heavy negotiation, and says, don't convert that into clandestine networks or anything. Basically, don't. I'll give you 2 offensive markers if you don't do anything with this. Since Stalin must decide before seeing what Roosevelt will do, and remember, negotiations and promises are not binding in this game, he gambles and takes the deal. He converts 3 of his productions into offensives, using 2 in the Far East and 1 on the Eastern Front, foregoing his hard-won Paul Mill issue. So these 2 will go here, and we probably don't need the directive offensive marker at that point. Let's see if it's in the illustrated. It's not. And this one will go on the Eastern Front. East Germany. The Americans begin each conference with 6 U.S. production markers. That was reduced to 5. There's the 5 because for the Lend-Lease aid given to myself. Franklin converts 4 of his production into 3 offensive support and 1 into naval support. So that to that. Oh wait, my bad. Not that, but that. Okay. In addition, the Americans gain 1 offensive for each of their European and Pacific commands, for a total of 5 offensive and 1 naval support. Yes, like I said, you follow the sequence of play because he's still in command of these until we determine that Churchill won the European theater, and that will change right after you grab all those. So that turns into that. Okay. And like I said, the way he weaves the narrative here is a little confusing because he actually has one more U.S. production to allocate. And he allocates it into the clandestine, into one political alignment and 3 clandestine network markers. So this issue that he won, you apply a production marker to it, and that turns into that. Okay. Roosevelt now views his obligations in a different light, and while apologizing profusely to Stalin, only places 1, not 2, like he promised, offensive markers to support the Eastern Front. So one here, using 2 on the Western Front. One in the Central Pacific. Let's see. And 1 offensive and 1 naval support in the Southwest Pacific Front attack on the Philippines. That's here, isn't it? Oh, wait, these actually go. You always keep these back here. The Allied level of cooperation is breaking down as the war winds to a close. The A-bomb issue would be addressed at this time, but it was not on the agenda, not an agenda item in this conference because the Americans are close to conducting a test, so they're not in a hurry. The biggest debate over the global issue resulted in Roosevelt's view holding sway with self-determination for Europe, which means this. Let's see. Self-determination for Europe, yes. And when this happens, all players can place any available political alignment markers in colonies without restriction. This concludes the business of the conference. Yes, the conference phase is over. And then we move on to the war phase. So click on ahead and we'll see you there.